16 different players, whether you should be starting them or sitting them during Week 12's Bye-Magedon. It is not a fun week to be a fantasy football manager, but we got to push to get to the playoffs. Every point matters. We're going to start at the quarterback position, work our way through the tight end position, and give you a start and sit at every position. So, Cameron, I'll start with you. Who is your quarterback start this week?
For me, it is Justin Herbert. And you mentioned Bye-Magedon. Atlanta, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Jacksonville, New Orleans, and the Jets all on bye. 6 teams when it really counts. That's absolutely killer. But I think Justin Herbert, even without, Josh Allen being on bye, Joe Burrow being on bye, I think he's earned the right to be an every week starter at this point. Quarterback 6 since week 8 in points per game, averaging 22. He has been awesome. He's he's had 19 points in every single one of those games. All but one of those games, he's had 270 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. He's showing that he can do it on the ground again. And now he gets Baltimore this week, who's given up the 3rd most points to fantasy quarterbacks on the season at 21.9. I think what Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow as well have proved, that when a quarterback has a nagging injury all season long, it tends to mean something. Because we get those 2 healthy again, and we're seeing, hey, there's a reason we were having MVP conversations about these guys in their second year in the league, right? These guys are legit. Justin Herbert's proven it once again, and they're kind of letting him cook a little bit back there. So, yeah, I definitely firing up Justin Herbert in this one.
Baltimore 28th in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks this year as well, meaning they are bottom of the pack in terms of overall fantasy points as well. They're giving up the 3rd most points per game on the season. You also look at Justin Herbert. It has been a shift since the bye week. You mentioned since week 8 was the stat that you pulled. Even going all the way back to week 6. I mean, they had their bye week in week 5, but through the first 4 weeks of the season, 144, 130, 125, 179 yards passing. He wasn't even sniffing 200 yards passing. But once you get out of the bye week in week 6, 237, 349, 279, 282. He had 164 against Tennessee, who has just been stingy against almost every quarterback this year. But then against Cincinnati in the shootout there, 297 yards. Yeah, Herbert's going to be slinging the rock around the yard this week. I absolutely love him as a start of the week. He was going to be mine before you decided to get on the dock early enough and claim him from me. So, you know what? I instead settled for Bo Nix. I will eat my words on Bo Nix and give Sean Payton some very, very high praise here because he's not using the old Drew Brees system. He's not trying to run it back and force feed this Russell Wilson system onto Bo Nix and say, actually, you can make this work. This is an evolving game plan week over week, and it's actually working. Nix has been a top 12 quarterback in 5 of his last 7 games, and he has scored 20-plus points in 4 of those 5 games. Vegas is 25th in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position as well. They've allowed the 4th most points per game to quarterbacks over the last 4 weeks. So I am super optimistic on Bo Nix this week. If you're even watching some of his film on YouTube, like these are really, really solid throws that he's making. Something that I wouldn't quite... If you go back to week 1 and tell me Bo Nix was making a throw, moving across the pocket to the right side of the field, adjusts and flips it back to the left side of the field for a touchdown, I would have called you crazy because that's not what I saw in week 1. But this team is growing and evolving, and Bo Nix is really providing for fantasy football teams right now. So I'm going to make him my start of the week. I think he has a perfectly fine matchup here with Vegas. I think he takes advantage of it.
Yeah, we were clowning him. We were all sitting together, me and Ty, watching the game. And it was, Bo Nix threw the ball more than 10 yards down the field. And it kind of was the confirmation bias we wanted of, hey, this guy's not going to be legit. And we kind of talked about it last week. I think the biggest reason, especially us in Minnesota, didn't like him was because of Sean Payton's comments after the draft, where he's like, I tricked them to take JJ McCarthy. And it's like, oh, whatever. But I think that's a big reason why, obviously, then also being a Vikings fan, not a ton of love for Sean Payton as well after his whole Bountygate scheme in the 2009 conference championship game. But like you said, we got to give it to Bo Nix. Dude's been playing unbelievably well over the last couple of weeks. He's looking like he's going to make a case to be one of the top quarterbacks in this draft class, which has looked pretty good all around so far. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. And then like you said, you play Vegas, so it's a great matchup. So I would ride the hot hand in this matchup, and Denver's got to keep winning. They're right on that edge of finding their way in the playoffs. I think I saw, according to some places, they're like 50% chance of making the playoffs.
Right.
So these wins matter, and I like you said, I'm all in Bo Nix this week.
You go back to week 1 where we were clowning him. You want to know who leads the league in deep ball attempts this year?
Is it Bo Nix?
It's Bo Nix.
That's so crazy.
It is seriously
It's
like
so
when I say I want to give, like, again, it pains me as a Minnesota Vikings fan to give high praise to Sean Payton, but man, what he has been doing with Bo Nix and how he's been able to turn this ship around from the first 2-3 weeks of the season. I mean, it is nothing short of remarkable. So ride the hot hand with Bo Nix here. Has a perfectly fine match with the Raiders. You can go ahead and play him. Before we move any further, though, make sure you're subscribed over here to the channel. Turn on that notification bell as well. I promise you will love our channel because we are posting relevant fantasy football content all throughout the regular season. We're going to get into the off season, do some dynasty stuff as well. So if you're playing in a dynasty league, or if you want to learn about dynasty leagues, hang around for that. And we're posting all year round. We're not going to take a 3-4 month hiatus. We're going to stay right here on the channel and give you fantasy football content all of the time. So if you want league winning advice down the stretch, hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell. Make sure you leave a like on this video as well. We're posting these kind of videos every single week for you. Let's turn to the quarterback sits here, Cameron. And again, in a week that's a Bye-Magedon, this is guys who were not looking to stream. That's basically what these sits come down to. It's like, oh, really? You're going to tell me to sit like it doesn't feel like it, but we're not looking to stream these guys. So who's the guy you're looking to not start this week?
Matt Stafford. And I know he just came off a great week, 4 touchdowns, 270 yards. But if we're looking at the entire season, he's only got 2 such games where he's finished in the top 10. Both games he had to throw for 270 and 4. Now he's playing Philly, who's allowing only 14 fantasy points a game to quarterbacks. I'm not expecting him to pop off in the same way. Right? Could he? Absolutely. He's Matt Stafford with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua and Sean McVay calling the offense. But if I'm playing the odds on this one, I'm taking the under on 270 yards and 4 touchdowns. So I think that's just what it comes down to. He's got no rushing upside, so you need a great game. Philly's been playing great on defense. You probably have another option, but like you said, you might be stuck with Matthew Stafford in this one because of everyone on bye.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and avoid Sam Darnold in a divisional matchup with the Chicago Bears this week. They're only giving up 11.5 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this year. That is the lowest mark in the entire league. And I get that's somewhat kind of watered down, right? When you play against Drake May, Andy Dalton, Anthony Richardson early in the season, Will Levis in week 1, right? But we've also seen quarterbacks like Matthew Stafford, like Kyler Murray, who have scored less than 6 fantasy points against this Bears defense. So if he can't protect the ball in this game, I actually think he might be in for a somewhat long day at Soldier Field. So I'm going to pass on Sam Darnold. I know he was fine against Tennessee last week. I just don't think lightning strikes twice here with Sam Darnold, especially with 5 interceptions in his last 3 games. That's not a quarterback I ideally want to target for my lineups down the stretch here. Mm-hmm. Let's move on to running back starts and sits now, Cameron. Who's your running back start of the week?
It's Tyrone Tracy, and I'm going to be honest, this is going to be ugly. This Giants team is going to be ugly. Man. If you've been following the quarterback controversy right now, Daniel Jones is quarterback 4 for them behind Tim Boyle. Drew Lock is upset because he was promised he was the backup, but now they've gone with Tommy DeVito, right? And it's just it is going to be ugly. But I think it's going to be similar to the Saquon experience last year. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying he is Saquon Barkley, but I mean it from the aspect of lots of volume, minimal yards per carry, but the volume's going to be enough that I think he's going to be relevant for your fantasy lineup, right? That's kind of where we're at. Yep. Because unlike Saquon last year, you're not hoping Tyrone Tracy turns it on and is the top 5 running back. He's a top 20 running back, and you're going to be okay with that. But he's seen 20, 16, 18 carries over his last 3. He's seen 16 plus carries in 5 of his last 6. And he has a pretty good matchup against the Buccaneers, who are giving up the 5th most points to running backs right now and allowing 4.8 yards per carry. So if you got any defense, right, that you're going to be able to hopefully find some running room against, the Bucs are a good one. Yeah. I actually considered the guy on the other side of this game too, Bucky Irving, as my start of the week. But I felt like Tyrone Tracy is probably the grosser one right now with Tommy DeVito at quarterback. So I wanted to give you that push. But if you're considering Bucky as well, I want to extend that push to you that he should be in your starting lineup as well in this one.
Tampa Bay is 32nd in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs over the last 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So they are getting chewed up on the ground. They are 28th on the season. And you even look at just total fantasy points, they have allowed the 5th most as well. So yeah, this is a matchup to target Tyrone Tracy in when he's getting the volume. He's outplaying Devin Singletary. How is there any worry for you about, the tip pass interception that at the end of that Carolina game in Germany? Is there any concern about that for you, where Devin Singletary actually wiggles his way back into a slightly bigger piece of the workload for you?
I really, my only worry about him coming back in is that they're like, hey, Tyrone Tracy's getting too many yards per carry. We're supposed to lose these games for a better draft pick. I don't think it matters too much, right? You brought in Singletary as a free agent on a 1-year deal. I'm assuming they're just going to roll with Tracy, the younger guy, hoping that, hey, can he prove that we don't need to bring in a running back next year? So it is got to be a little bit of a concern, right? Because we're not talking about like a first-round talent or something. Like we're talking about Tracy, a 4th or 5th-round guy. But I think he'll be fine, but yeah, definitely something to monitor at least.
Yeah, I made the point over on my drop candidates video for Fantasy Pros earlier this week that you can still drop Devin Singletary because the Giants aren't in playoff contention.
No.
What are they going to do? Run out Devin Singletary when they could actually just see what kind of juice Tyrone Tracy has, unless if they really want to like preserve the tread on the tires. It's like the only case I could think of, but like, when you bring in Devin Singletary on a 1-year deal, why not just see what kind of juice this Tyrone Tracy kid really, really has when you give him a full workload, when you give him, 80% of the touches compared to Devin Singletary. So, yeah, I love Tyrone Tracy this week. I think the matchup is there with Tampa. When you got Tommy DeVito at quarterback, nobody's scared of him. They might be scared of the crime family, but not of Tommy DeVito in and of himself. But I love Tyrone Tracy this week. I'm 100% with you there. My running back start of the week is Brian Robinson Jr. of the Washington Commanders. Look, when he came back against the Eagles last week, he essentially picked up right where he left off. It was 16 carries for 63 yards and a score after he missed 2 games. He's actually scored in all but 2 games this year, which was somewhat surprising to me. So now he gets a Cowboys defense. Well, they've given up 13 rushing touchdowns to running backs this year, which is the second most in the league, only to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They've also allowed an 80-yard rusher in 4 of their last 5 games, while giving up the 3rd most points of the position over the last 4 weeks. Brian Robinson is this player I hate talking about Brian Robinson. I'm not going to lie, because he's not this sexy player. And I feel like when I tell you to start him, I want to be able to tell you to start someone exciting, someone that could explode and give you like a top 10, top 12 week. Brian Robinson never strikes me as that guy. He's the guy you shove between the tackles, hope he gives you 4, 4.25, 4.5 a carry, right? He's just that plotter, but in a great matchup here, I think you have to start Brian Robinson, especially in the Bye-Magedon, where, he's going to be creeping into that top 20 running backs this week. And frankly, if he does give you 80 yards and a score and catches a pass or 2 along the way, like he might finish as a top 15 back this week.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. He's pretty much Najee Harris on a good team with a coach who wants to consistently use him at the goal line. And so I mean, that's what it comes down to. Dallas, they got Cooper Rush right now. Yeah, he did put up 354 passing yards last week, so I do got to give him that. But they're not scoring on people, right? Washington's going to get up early in this. CeeDee Lamb said it last week. Everyone's going to look to embarrass them, and I think in a divisional matchup, especially, Washington is going to look to embarrass them. And I think a big way they're going to do that is on the ground. I'd be shocked if he's under 16, 17 carries this week. I'd be shocked if he doesn't score a touchdown. So yeah, I like when it feels like the floor is almost 14 fantasy points.
Yeah.
Which I shouldn't say that it is, but that's what it feels like this week against Dallas. He's an automatic start for sure.
Do you think the Cowboys could just throw in the towel early in this game too? Playing on Thanksgiving, quick turnaround. Is there a chance where Washington ends up just getting up, 28-3, and it's just like, all right, no, we're done. We're throwing in the towel. And then it's just Brian Robinson running out the clock the rest of the game. I mean, there is a world where I think that actually happens.
No, 100%. 100%. And I just gotta say, Dallas, do us a favor. Throw Trey Lance out there. You know what
Yes.
Cooper Rush is.
Yes.
We don't want to see it.
My boy.
At least go down with the ship with Trey Lance, right? It can't be worse than what we're watching. At least give us something, fun and exciting. We don't want to watch Cooper Rush anymore.
5th round pick. Is that what they gave up for him?
Yeah. And he can't be.
It's not a third, right? A 4th round.
Fourth, that's what it was. Yes, 4th round.
That's what it was. I'm like, I don't think it was a third. A third would have been too embarrassing. But a 4th round pick they threw out there. Yeah, throw Trey Lance out there. Do us a favor.
Please.
Let's turn the corners. Cornerback, running back sit here. Goodness, I'm talking corners and I can't even get the position right. Running back sits now, Cameron. Who's your running back sit of the week?
It's DeAndre Swift. And we've been hinting at, I just don't know if we can trust him in this upcoming schedule. And you know what? He showed up against Green Bay. I will say most of it came on that 30-yard touchdown run. You can't take that away. Swift is a guy we've seen over his career that he'll hit that big play. I just don't think that happens this week against Minnesota, who is allowing 74 rush yards a game right now.
Yeah.
They've only given up 4 rushing touchdowns in the season. And their 2 worst games were out there without their middle linebacker, Blake Cashman, who's back now. Against the Lions, they gave up 144, and against the Rams, they gave up 104. You take out those 2 games, they're allowing 61 yards per game in every other week. It's just, there's just not a lot of reason for optimism. And so, yeah, Swift's last 3 games, they haven't been amazing. They haven't been stellar in the same way that his stretch where he was the running back 3, other than a 30-yard touchdown run, like I said. And I just don't think you can bank on that this week against Minnesota. I understand, though, he's been good enough where he probably is your running back 2. Yeah. And so your pivot this week is gross. But if you have the option, yeah, I would move off of him, looking at, other wide receivers in that flex territory. If you can, that would be I guess the way I'd go about it this week.
Yeah, the Bye-Magedon is so tough, man, because I pushed DeAndre Swift as far as I could down my rankings. I have him as my running back 20. But even at that, Rachaad White, would you rather play Rachaad White or DeAndre Swift this week?
Honestly, I think I'd play Rachaad White. So I'll admit, Rachaad White's a guy I'm actually growing on a lot over the back half of this season.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'd go Rachaad White this week.
Yeah, you could do potentially Rachaad White. Kareem Hunt, if we get Isaiah Pacheco back this week at all.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go Kareem Hunt, especially Andy
Carolina.
Reid's. Yeah, and Andy Reid's comments of when he's ready, he'll be back. That doesn't give me the confidence that he's fully ready.
Rico Dowdle against Washington.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go Swift in that one.
Yeah, right.
I just don't want, unless it's CeeDee Lamb, I don't want to mess with the Cowboys offense.
Only other 2 names I'll bring up then. Najee Harris and J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins gets Baltimore. Najee Harris against Cleveland on Thursday night.
So I'm going Najee for sure, just because I know the volume is going to be there. J.K. is tough because Baltimore has been very similar. If I'm going to bet one team, though, to not move away from the run, it's the Chargers. So I'm going to stick with J.K. Dobbins, but those are 2 gross matchups right there.
Yeah, and that wraps out our top 24 in our consensus rankings right now, right? So it's if you have the luxury of sitting DeAndre Swift this week, I think you can look to the Bye-Magedon. Just makes it really, really tough though. So if anything, lower your expectations. The one guy I didn't bring up though, because I'm going to talk about him, I think you definitely should be playing all those guys I mentioned ahead of him this week. Look, man, Chuba Hubbard has been so good. I want nothing to do with him against the Kansas City Chiefs coming out of the bye week, though. Chuba Hubbard, as I mentioned, was on an absolute tear, but the Chiefs have only been run on 168 times this year, and they have allowed 130 yards less on the ground than any other team in the league. They've only allowed 522 rushing yards this year. They're allowing only 14.8 fantasy points per game total to the running back position, not to individual running backs, but total per game, and only 4 teams have rushed for more than 60 yards against the Kansas City Chiefs this year. This is not a matchup I'm excited for, especially if you potentially get Jonathan Brooks back in this matchup as well. I understand Jonathan Brooks isn't going to come out and break the doors off in his first game and take 60-70% of the snaps, but it's small enough of the pie where it might impact Chuba's overall fantasy production on the day, but I also don't expect this game to be close. I'm not predicting it's going to be 52-6, like Detroit smashed the Jaguars last week, but one of these teams is contending for the Super Bowl and one of these teams is contending for the first overall pick. So that's just kind of where I stand here is if this game is going to be close, I don't think Chuba is going to find any success on the ground. I think the Chiefs roll in this one, and there's just not going to be a high need for Chuba to try and get 20 carries on the ground for 100 plus yards this week.
Yeah, you look at this. I mean, this Chiefs team last week, they played the Bills in their first loss, gave up 30 points. James Cook, 9 carries for 20 yards. The two best running back performances so far this year against him. Jordan Mason, 14 carries for 58 yards, and Audric Estime, 14 carries for 53 yards.
Audric Estime! What? Dog!
That's not something you want, though, in your lineup. That's not something you can bank on. Derrick Henry, they've held to under 50. Bijan Robinson, they held to 31 yards, right? I mean, Jordan Mason, when he was cooking, they held low. J.K. Dobbins, they held under 40 yards. They've just stopped everyone on the run. And then you can't run against them because you're playing against Patrick Mahomes. So, right, you got to be able to score points at the same time. And if you're banking on the Carolina Panthers to score a lot of points against the Chiefs,
that's a bad bet.
I don't know what to tell you.
That's a bad bet to make right there. Let's take a quick break, Cameron. We'll be back with the pass catching start and sits afterwards. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We've gone through our quarterback and running back starts and sits of the week. Let's move on to the wide receivers now. Cameron, who are you starting with confidence at the wide receiver position this week?
It's Rome Odunze. And
I like this one.
The reason is the Vikings are the opposite against the pass as they are against the run. I talked about how good they have been against the run. But if you look at them against the pass, they're allowing the 5th most yards per game. And they're allowing the largest average separation per target, which means that wide receivers have a 4-yard cushion on their average target when the ball's coming their way. And, that's just what the Vikings have decided to live and die by is the pass. Caleb Williams and this offense is out from under the Shane Waldron curse. They played a little more free last week. They should have beaten the Packers, but lost on a last-second blocked field goal. And Odunze's been seeing good volume. Last week, 10 targets. He had 6 receptions, right? I mean, it's good to see him getting involved. He has seen 6+ targets each week since the bye. Him and DJ Moore have kind of separated as, the 2 go-to targets in this offense. I think he just continues to get better. We've seen that from young wide receivers over and over and over again as the season goes on, as they're adjusting to the NFL speed. They start to look better. I think you're going to continue to see that. And I think the Bears are really going to have to rely on the pass. And so maybe it's not the prettiest, right? We never know with Caleb Williams if it's actually going to be pretty or not. But at the very least, I think you're going to see enough volume where on a week like this, he should be in your starting lineup.
Again, another case of the post-bye rookie bump here, right? I mean, you read the targets 6, 7, 6, and 10. I think we continue to see that go up for Rome Odunze. Since the bye, he's been the wide receiver 33 in PPR format. So that's like flex territory. He's giving you 10.5 a week. It's not astronomical. He's not giving you 15, 20 a game. I mean, no wide receiver is giving you 20 a game, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like there are improvements being made here. And as we get further from the bye, I do think we start to see Rome getting more involved. And this is the matchup where you could 100% take advantage of that against the Minnesota Vikings secondary. So I'm with you on Rome Odunze. I'm good, especially in a Bye-Magedon. If you need a flex option this week, a high upside flex option, I think Rome Odunze is one of those guys you could potentially slide in this week.
sure.
I'm not slotting him in as my wide receiver 2 with the utmost confidence this
Yes.
week. But if you need a high upside flex, I think Rome Odunze is worth swinging for the fences with against the Minnesota Vikings at Soldier Field. My wide receiver start of the week, I'm also going to talk about a rookie because I'm going to take your quarterback's wide receiver 1 in Lad McConkey against the Baltimore Ravens. Lad, again, since the bye week for them, since week 6, wide receiver 12 overall in PPR formats. He's averaging 14 fantasy points per game. That is good for the wide receiver 21. And he is 5th in receiving yards during that stretch. He's averaging 15.7 yards per reception. Last week against the Bengals in the shootout, he drew a career high 9 targets, caught 6 of them for another career high, 123 yards. And look, this Ravens defense, I'm going to spare you the stats because we know they stink against wide receivers this year. So I think McConkey needs to be a lineup lock at this point. We're going to continue to see him get more and more involved. That target share is going to continue rising. I don't care how much you want to believe in Quentin Johnston again. If you want to still hold on to faith with Josh Palmer, but I think everybody kind of left that train, in week 3. Lad McConkey's the guy here, all right? So in a matchup that could, again, be very similar to Cincinnati, a high-scoring back and forth affair between these teams, I really like Lad McConkey, especially if you got Justin Herbert this week. You compare those two up, and I think that might be one of the most lethal stacks of the week.
Yeah, you look at Quentin Johnston, wide receiver 11 over the last 3 weeks. Fantastic. He's also only seen 15 targets in that time frame, right? So he's got touchdowns. And so you're not worried about him taking away from Lad. And like you said, I mean, the targets have been there. He's, 1 game under 6 targets. That was against Tennessee when he had 2. We saw it again in Cincinnati, though. When Justin Herbert needed to move the ball, he found Lad McConkey.
Yeah.
In a game against Baltimore now, at home again, I got to imagine he's going to look for McConkey. And like you said, he's getting it done down the field. His yards per reception in his last 4 games, 18.5, 12.8, 26, and 20.5. Yeah. Like, these aren't just, dink and dumps, and he's just a PPR machine. He's getting used a ton since the bye. 63% snap share, 86, 62, 84, 78, 73. The worry with him was, is he going to be in the slot too much, right? Is he not going to be used in 2 wide receiver sets? It hasn't mattered because he's on the field and he's getting targets. So he's doing everything you can ask from. Justin Herbert's cooking, and McConkey's the guy that he's going to. So, yeah, I feel like it's a no-brainer at this point for him for sure.
Yeah, this is where I like, we love our audio listeners over on the podcast feed. This is where I strongly encourage people to come over to the YouTube, though, because when we are showing game clips of these players, the thing that stood out to me the most against the Bengals was, again, the amount of 10 plus air yard targets to Lad McConkey, where he's picking up, 17, 18, 23 yard gains, right? And it's not the dink and dunk. Okay, watch him catch a 5-yard slant and take it another 15 yards afterwards. It is, no, he's running these crossing routes and these out routes, and Justin Herbert is dropping them on a dime, and he's picking up 15 yards through the air, right? So I think there's so much to love here with Lad McConkey. I think down the stretch, if their schedule is a little bit better, I might be willing to call him a league winner. But anyway, at any rate, that post-rookie bye week bump is so real. Take advantage of it. We both like Rome. We both like Lad McConkey this week. These should be guys who are locked into your flex spots, at the very least this week. And I think Lad McConkey has a real case to be a wide receiver too. Wide receiver sits, guys, we're less optimistic about here. Cameron, who's your wide receiver set?
Mine is Jacoby Myers. And it might surprise you, but since week 3, he is the wide receiver 18 in points per game. He's outscoring the likes of DK Metcalf, Lad McConkey, even Brian Thomas, Mike Evans. And this is in points per game, right? So even if these guys have missed time, DJ Moore, Devonta Smith, Devonta Adams. So he's been playing well. He's been seeing good volume on top of that. I shouldn't try. I sound like I'm justifying my sit, why he's a sit. But I'm just trying to paint the picture of, I think he's still going to see good volume in this one as far as targets go, because he's seen 9, 10, 9, 7, 11, 6. But the issue is you're playing against Pat Surtain. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter if you see the targets because you're not going to catch most of them. He held Drake London last week to 3 receptions for 61 yards. And I got to imagine that he's going to do a lot of the same this week. And on top of that, this Vegas team just really isn't that good.
No.
And so you've got a Denver team that's rolling, that's going to look to shut down a divisional opponent. I think they do. The only bright spot on that team has been Brock Bowers, and I guess I just laid it out. Jacoby Myers has been kind of a bright spot, but I think they roll over them. Jacoby is not the good thing about him, at least, is you probably drafted him as your wide receiver 4, maybe even your wide receiver 5.
Yep.
So he's a guy that you might be considering to put in your lineup, and hopefully you do have a pivot at this point that you can go another direction with. And so yeah, Pat Surtain, each week, if he's covering your guy, I'd probably look a different direction unless we're talking about one of the elite wide receivers.
Yeah, and even in PPR formats, Jacoby Myers is just significantly more valuable. In half PPR formats, you lose a little bit of the bit of the shine there. Where I mean, again, it's you get a 17.7, you get a 14.2, a 14.5, but 7.9, 5, 7.4, 6.8, like it's nothing that's actually putting you over the top. So I'm with you in a matchup against the Broncos that I could just care less for. Like, let's just stick to Brock Bowers here. He's the one you can absolutely start this week in this Raiders offense. Otherwise, I'm not too keen on forcing any of these other guys into my lineup whatsoever. If Jacoby Myers is only going to give me, 4 for 37 this week, that's not starting worthy to me in my lineup, even in a Bye-Magedon.
Wow. Does Brock Bowers really have 90 targets already?
Yes, he does.
Holy crap.
Yes, he does. He's going to smash. He's like going to smash Puka's rookie record.
I was just looking to see how good he's been. And
it's been stupid.
Unreal.
It's been stupid. Again, another player where okay, so now I got to go back. Like I made a short right after the NFL draft where I talked about Bo Nix and Brock Bowers as 2 of the worst first round picks this year. This is where context is so important because I'll eat my words on Bo Nix. I'm still not convinced Brock Bowers was the right pick for the Las Vegas Raiders, no matter how good he's been this year. From a fantasy football perspective, sure, we absolutely love it.
Yeah.
But what trajectory are the Las Vegas Raiders on right now? One where they're going to be stuck in a rebuild here for another 3-4 years. Like, I just don't know if Brock Bowers was the luxury pick. You should have gone out and taken that. I still stand by that. Brock Bowers has been phenomenal. He's been better than I expected him to be. I'm still not a fan of that first round pick though, despite him being this good, because we could have had that on the Rams. We could have had it with Sean McVay. We were robbed.
Although the one thing I will say about that is it might have hurt because then you got so many target hogs on one team. From NFL standpoint, it would have been a ton of fun to watch, but fantasy would have been like
fantasy. No, we'd be talking about Brock Bowers as like a borderline top 10 and not a top 3 lock rest of season. No.
Yep.
Let's get back to the wide receivers though, because my wide receiver sit of the week is Tank Dell, and I feel like I'm taking a little bit of an easy route here, but because it's Bye-Magedon, I feel like I can get away with this one, right? Because I think some managers might actually be forced into considering him for their flex spot. The Titans secondary, it's stingy. We talked about it earlier. 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers allowed, 5th fewest to perimeter wide receivers, and they are 28th in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to perimeter wide receivers, meaning they are very, 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 very stingy. Bobby Slowick, he just wants to put the ball into Joe Mixon's gut, man. He wants to give him 25 opportunities per game and just watch him go to work, right? Nico is the alpha. He'll continue to chip into Tank Dell's target shares. He didn't play a full workload on Monday Night Football against the Cowboys. So that's only going to increase. And Nico still saw 7 targets, man. It was 7 targets to Tank, 7 targets to Nico.
Yeah.
Eventually that's going to be 10 targets to Nico and like 4 or 5 to Tank. And that does concern me a little bit. So if Joe Mixon's going to continue to be this workhorse and Bobby Slowick just wants to continue feeding him in the run game, Nico's the alpha. Tough matchup with Tennessee. This is a pretty easy one to talk me out of here.
Yeah, Tank he's one of those guys. Honestly, him and Jalen Waddle feel very similar at this point, where you just are like, I should be able to start him. I know he's good, kind of a thing. And you just can't. And like Texans, because when Nico's out there, they put up points. But like you said, I just wouldn't trust him until I see it. That's where I am with Tank rest of season. I need to see it before I can trust him again, because he killed it. It's not just like, you know what, that was a kind of a bummer. It kills you. Like he loses you weeks because he just puts up such low points. And I agree. I guarantee I have a league this week where I'm gonna have to, he's gonna be in consideration for my lineup. And I'm not going to pull the trigger. There's a lot of other guys that I'm going to put ahead of him that I just don't want to have.
I mean, I am in that spot in our dynasty league. I got Garrett Wilson on bye this week. I need someone in that final flex spot for me. Well, Garrett Wilson and who else? I have someone else on bye this week. Bengals are on bye, right? I got Jamar Chase on bye. So I'm looking. So I got AJ Brown and CD Lamb slotted in, but I'm without a Garrett Wilson.
You just wanted to show off those wide receivers.
Okay.
You just wanted a reason to say, "Hey, I got Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, and Garrett Wilson as my wide receivers."
That's totally how it came off. It was not meant to come across, but it totally came off that way. But like they're on bye this week. I got Tyrone Tracy in one of my flex spots, but it was Tank Dell, Rico Dowdle, or Rachaad White for that final flex spot.
Oh.
And I'm settling on Rachaad White.
Yeah, I think that's the call.
I just because I can't trust Tank. He might give me what 7-8 points maybe, but that's about all I can trust him for.
Yeah.
When it took Nico and Stephon Diggs being out to get him 13.5 and 18.6 in PPR formats. So I just not optimistic. Not a high upside guy that even in a Bye-Magedon, I just can't get there with Tank Dell, despite how much I love the player.
For sure.
All right, everybody's favorite game of the week now. Who do I throw in at my tight end position? It's a random guess every single week. Unfortunately, well, I guess you're getting a little kind of in your bag. Not a ton. Mine feels blatantly obvious, but who's your tight end start this week? When I mean, there are some pretty big tight end names on bye this week.
No, it's old man Zach Ertz, which is funny to say because he's actually younger than Travis Kelce, even though it feels like he's been in the league since 1930. But over his last 6 games, he's over 50, or over his last 6 games that he's had over a 50% target or snap share. He has seen 8, 5, 5, 11, 8, and 7 targets. He has seen at least 4 catches for 40 yards in all but one of those games. I talk about that as his floor. I'm not saying, hey, you know what, start him, then you'll get 8 points. That's the floor that you're getting, and as crazy as that is, that's a pretty good floor for tight ends right now. And then he showed last week that he can find the end zone, and Jane Daniels using him a ton. I really like him in this one.
Yeah, you could play Zach Ertz this week. I think your options are very, very limited.
Yes,
because he's just gonna dink and dunk and chunk his way to 3-4 catches for 30, 40 yards, and if he hits the end zone, that's a trifecta you need there. So I'm okay playing Zach Ertz this week. You can totally fire him up if you need to. You could do a lot worse for sure than Zach Ertz this week. Mine, unfortunately, like I said, is somewhat obvious. It's going to be Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. Again, just to name some of the tight ends who are on bye here this week. It's Kyle Pitts, Evan Ingram, Dalton Kincaid, Taysom Hill after his 40-point explosion, all on bye. So Goddard kind of gets launched into this top 7 consideration immediately. And he's been like decently productive since returning from injury in week 10 too. 10.5, tight end 9 in week 10, week 11, 11.1, the tight end 11 as well. You like the match with the Rams, 7th most points allowed to the position this year. So Dallas Goedert isn't this like world-beating tight end who's going to give you a phenomenal day. But again, if you're watching over on YouTube, you can say he can pick up the chunk plays when you need him to. He's going to give you a boost in PPR formats. He'll be plenty involved in this offense still. So I'll take Dallas Goedert here in a game that I think could be a little bit of a fun back and forth between the Eagles and Rams, even though this Eagles defense has been phenomenal recently. Dallas Goedert is just kind of this de facto, go ahead, he's top 10 this week. You may as well fire him up if you have him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. It's just
it's
just so gross with the tight end position.
It is.
Like you said, you get 10 points. I take 10 points. Don't risk it on something else.
Totally. I was so ready after last week. I'm like, Taysom Hill, start of the week this week. And it's like, no, he's on bye. So he can't even play Taysom Hill off of his phenomenal week. I went and picked him up still in the league. I'm like, I'm going to sit on him because, man, that Saints offense, they have nobody. And it's going to be like Taysom Hill might actually be their best weapon, not named Alvin Kamara right now. So tight end sits. Who are you not looking to start? Again, very similar to quarterbacks. Who are you not looking to start this week or not looking to fall back on this week?
Dalton Schultz. Right. The only reason you'd ever consider only reason you consider him is just because we're on Bye-Magedon, but Nico's back and he's playing against the Titans for allowing under 6 points to tight end. So yeah, I want nothing to do with it. Don't try to stream him find another option.
Dalton Schultz.
Yep.
It's just so blah.
Yeah.
Mine's at least a little bit more of a fun name. Tucker Kraft's coming off of a goose egg against the 49ers, gets the 49ers now this week. They've actually been really tough on tight ends this year. Only 3 have scored double-digit fantasy points against San Francisco this year. 28th in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. Top 5. I've been using that interchangeably, but 28th, meaning they allow the fewest. When I was mentioning it earlier, I meant it in a poor context. I realized I took down my notes and I'm like, wait, they're all 28th in this, but no, they are tough on tight ends. 5th in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, meaning they are stingy. So Tucker Kraft, I won't push him into my lineup this week, but you know what? If you have to, you might have to, because it's Bye-Magedon, boys and girls. But we'll leave you at that. If you have start and sit questions and you're over on YouTube, you can go visit our Discord as well. We've got about almost 4,500 people over there who are ready to help dominate your fantasy football leagues, who are ready to answer your polls, your start sit questions, your waiver wire questions, your trade questions. If your trades are still open in your league, some deadlines are open to this week, some go right up to the playoffs. We've kind of stopped talking about it because for the most part, trade deadlines have passed in our leagues. They have in most leagues, but if it's open, you can drop your question over there and people will help you out. Anything you want to add before we sign off for Cameron?
Nah, just go win this week.
Go win this week. Best of luck in your matchups, and make sure you follow us on the socials as well for even more content. FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. Follow me on X as well at Lucas Wenzel. Camlaw FFF for Cameron. We'll be back next week. We're chatting some playoff heroes. We're chatting some risers and fallers in fantasy rankings. And of course, we'll be back with our classic 16 to 24 players who will change the outcome of your week 13 matchup. Leading up to the holiday as well, we're not taking time off. We're going to be bringing you 3 episodes, plenty of content when you're on the road visiting family. So thanks so much, y'all. Again, if you're not subscribed, turn on the notification bell so you know when all of our newest content is up. We appreciate you. We'll see you all soon. Deuces.